As the meta continues to develop, players are starting to run less megas per team. So today, I want to talk about some of the best non-mega Pokemon in Pokemon Legends EA ranked battles. Now, before we jump into it, I do want to classify this is Pokemon that cannot Mega Evolve at all. Of course, we are starting to see a shift in some Pokemon. We are seeing things like Excadrill and Garchomp in particular moving to things like Focus Sash. We're also seeing things like, Sugarberry Ampharos and whatnot. So Pokemon like that won't be spoken about today. This is strictly going to be Pokemon that do not have the ability to Mega Evolve at all. So kicking us off first here, we have a very, very interesting one, and that is because it's actually not a fully evolved Pokemon, and that is Doublade. Now, Doublade is doing pretty good right now for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people believe it actually might be a bit better than Aegislash just because of how long stance change takes, basically just to switch in and out of your forms, right? And then on top of that as well, having base 150 defense with access to a Violite is also incredibly good, right? Getting that buff to both of your defenses is very, very good. And then on top of that, right now we are just in a very physically offensive metagame. So something like a Violite Doublade paired up with dual screens is just incredibly strong right now. It has access to Sword Stance as well, which is very, very good. Obviously, just having a way to buff up your attack stat is very, very important. And then in terms of stab moves, there are 3 different ones I kind of recommend here. You've got Iron Head, you've got Shadow Claw, and you have Shadow Sneak, right? Typically, I don't think you want to run all 3 of these. I do think you want to drop one of the 2 Ghost moves, whether that be Shadow Claw or Shadow Sneak, but I do believe that is strictly up to your playstyle. And there are a few different moves you can slap in there. So Close Combat is one of its better ones in terms of just raw damage output. A +1 Close Combat off this thing will deal ridiculous amounts of damage. If you do need something to break screens, however, it does have access to Brick Break, which I do think is very, very good. And another option it does have as well, actually, which does help into some of the fire types, is Rock Slide. So Doublade 1 hits very, very hard as it is, right? Base 100 is like nothing to scoff at, especially if you do play Adamant Nature. If you have a look, something like Adamant, you're running like this, you're at level 50. This Pokemon does hit quite hard. 178 is definitely respectable, especially when you have access to things like Sword Stance as well, right? So you buff up that attack stat, you have really, really good coverage. Iron Head's fantastic, obviously, into a lot of the fairies that are running around. Again, things like Close Combat, Rock Slide give you options as well into some of the, the fire types, the steel types, stuff like that. And of course, Shadow Sneak or Shadow Claw, whichever one you opt for, is just really good stab, right? Shadow Sneak is obviously a quick priority move. It allows you to snipe some KOs. And also just Shadow Claw is just good neutral damage into basically everything that isn't a dark type. So yeah, and normal type of course as well. And again, that's where things like Close Combat come into play. But yeah, very, very strong Pokemon, and one I'm definitely seeing rise up a bit on the ladder. So next up here, this is a Pokemon where if you have been playing, I'm sure you have seen it before, and that is Glaceon. Now, Glaceon right now, of course, very, very powerful. With things like Garchomp and Gyarados running the metagame, having access to both a Stab Ice Beam and a Stab Freeze Dry is just incredibly cool, right? It's very, very strong. This Pokemon, I will say the one bad thing about it is it doesn't really have any coverage moves, right? The only coverage moves you really have are things like Shadow Ball and Hyper Voice. And in my opinion, at that stage, you may as well just, not use it. You may as well use something else. So I'm a huge believer in running at least bare minimum 3 attacks. And then your last move kind of depends on your item, right? I'm a huge fan of Never Melt Ice plus Kind Mind. I think this set here is really, really good because with this, right, you have insane ice damage coming out, and all like Blizzard, Ice Beam, and Freeze Dry all kind of do different things, right? Blizzard is like a really long, range move. It's got a bit of a channel up, but like, if you can like third party, 2 Pokemon fighting, especially at 2 Garchomps, hit him with a Blizzard, it deals massive damage. Ice Beam is definitely one of your quicker ways to, get out that quick snipe, which is very good. It's, decent range, good damage, of course, very, very nice. And then Freeze Dry also kind of does get you in the middle and get you on top of things and just does big AoE around you. So very, very strong. And the other option as well I've seen is the Assault Vest stuff. And typically at this stage, you're probably looking at either Ice Shard or Icy Wind. It's really up to you and what you want to do. Personally, I like Icy Wind. It's a bit more damage, and obviously, you are using that special attack stat, which is very, very good. And in my opinion, EVs on this Pokemon are pretty easy, right? If you have a look at it, right, it's a 130 base special attacker. This Pokemon just wants that modest nature, right? You want to get as much damage out of it as possible. And 110 defense, 95 special defense are both very, very solid. And 65 HP is kind of lackluster. So this is a Pokemon where regardless of your set, this is basically what you're going to almost always want to be running. I have tested out different EVs in the past, but I do think this is the optimal set. So the next Pokemon I want to talk about here is one that I've actually been seeing quite a bit more recently, and it's always pretty damn strong when I see it, and that is Machamp. Now, Machamp's a really interesting Pokemon, right? When you look at its base stats, 90, 80, 85 is like decent bulk, especially behind screens. Again, I think screens is one of the best, ways to play this game right now. So that bulk is really, really solid. Again, you pair it up with 130 attack stat, this thing can hit very, very hard, and it has a lot of fantastic coverage. Now, before we jump into the coverage moves, I will say, if you do want some some form of screen support. This guy actually gets access to light screen. Unfortunately, it doesn't get reflect, but definitely worth mentioning. And then for the moveset, right? So typically, I do think you are almost always going to want close combat. Close combat is very, very good, right? This move is just a, you know, high power stab move. It's very, very nice. I have also seen people run dynamic punch. Obviously, accuracy in Legends EA is a bit different to the normal games, but I'm not the biggest fan of this because, like, for me, it's like you may as well just click CC. But it also has access to Brick Break as well. Very similar to what we were saying about Doublade, right? This is a Pokemon where you can run Brick Break just to be the anti-screen spawn for your team, which again, very, very good, right? Especially into things like Ampharos and of course the Metagrosses out there. Having options like Brick Break to break those screens, very, very solid. Now, this is where things do get a bit fun with Machamp, because Machamp actually has quite a lot of options, right? So the main thing I would say going for Machamp is it has access to both Thunder Punch and Ice Punch. Now, again, for me, this all completely depends on the set. I think typically for the most part, you want to drop one of your fighting moves for Brick Break, for Polka, but you do have options like Assault Vest, right? Assault Vest plus 4 attack is very, very good. And again, this Pokemon does have a lot of coverage moves, right? It has access to Earthquake, right? You have Poison Jab as well. It also has access to things like Rock Tomb, Dig, Rock Slide. So this Pokemon does have a lot. I'm even looking here. It has Knockoff, it has Bulldoze, it has Bullet Punch. So it really does have, and even Heavy Slam as well. So it has a lot of fantastic options. But I do think probably the best way to play this thing is Expert Belt. And the reason for that is when you have the Expert Belt, your super effective attacks deal 1.2 times more damage. And when you're going up against things like, you know, Garchomp and Gyarados constantly, having that extra buff on your Thunder Punches and your Ice Punches is really, really good. And typically, I would just say something like this is probably the way to go. And again, it completely depends on your team. It depends on your setup, right? Again, I think Machamp is really good with screens. I actually think you should almost always be playing screens right now, unless you're playing like some stupidly hyper-offensive matchup that has like a really positive matchup into screens. But again, Machamp right now, it has so much going for it, right? And again, you could even like drop Bulk up and just say, hey, I want to run something like Rock Slide. I want to run something like Poison Jab, Heavy Slam, Earthquake. Whatever it is you think your team needs, you can slot it into that last slot, and Machamp is going to do really, really good. So next up on the list is actually a mon I have shown off recently, and that is Hippowdon. Now, Hippowdon is really good for a couple reasons, right? So when you look at the current metagame, it's very, very physically offensive, right? You know, you look at things like Garchomp, you look at things like Excadrill, Gyarados, right? All the top mons, even Skarmory is another mon that's, you know, kind of floating around the top right now. And when you look at Hippowdon here, it has a very, very good HP stat at 108, and it has a very, very good defense stat at 118, and also has a really solid attack stat as well. Now, the set on this, in my opinion, it's pretty simple. I think it relies on Curse. It needs the attack buff and the defense buff, right? Its attack is pretty low as it is, right? If you were to have a look at something like just a level 50 Adamant Nature, like, yeah, like, it's okay. Don't get me wrong. It's not like awful, right? It is, you know, very similar to the Doublade that we had before, but it really, really relies on getting that buffed up attack stat, right? Very, very important. And again, also talking about this metagame, having a buffed up defensive stat is also incredible. Now, in terms of the EVs, I'll quickly touch on this before we jump too far into it. I think when I showcased mine, when I used my set, I was a lot less offensive. I think I was like 140 Adamant off memory with like max Spadef and the rest in HP. And the reason for that is this one's HP is like already really, really good, and its Spadef is quite lackluster. So going for a set like this where you max out the Spadef just makes it really, really bulky overall, especially when you have access to Curse. Now, anyway, speaking of the moves, this one has access to both Dig and Earthquake, which is very, very good, obviously, in this metagame. Earthquake, one of the most broken moves in the game. And Dig is also just really nice, especially on a slow Pokemon like Excadrill, because it just allows you to close the gap. But really, I think what is kind of making this mon thrive right now is its access to both Ice Fang and Thunder Fang. Now, because of these two moves and its attack stat both being, you know, pretty average, I do think it really, really benefits from Expert Belt. Now, there are other things you can do. I do think Assault Vest is still fine. You can go like, you know, double ground plus, you know, the Ice Fang, Thunder Fang with Assault Vest. That's still really good, and that would allow you to play a bit more HP than, you know, what we have here. It also has access to, you know, some other coverage moves here as well. It has access to things like Stone Edge, which is pretty decent. Iron Head as well, if you are worried about some of the fairies. Again, Rock Slide's another option. It also has Heavy Slam as well, which is, again, really good for the fairies. Probably better than Iron Head in most, if not all cases. Also has access to, you know, things like Stealth Rock as well. I haven't played around with Stealth Rock too much myself, but I do think it is very solid. And yeah, Hippo just has like a really, really positive matchup right now. It's just super bulky. It can deal pretty decent damage, and it's just really, really good at trading. And I feel like I've said it with everything so far, but if you put this thing on screens, it is like impossible to kill. So the next one I want to touch on here is actually another one I've seen, picking up quite a bit recently, and that is Tyrantrum. Now, Tyrantrum, very similar to what we say about Hippo, actually has some really, really good bulk, right? 119 defense is crazy, and 121 attack is definitely nothing to scoff at, right? You can go for something like a Adamant Nature here, and this Pokemon does hit quite hard, especially when its two primary stab moves are things like, what is it? Not Rock Smash, it's Head Smash. Head Smash, 150 base power, right? And then, of course, Outrage, right? This Pokemon has two of the strongest stab moves in the game. It's kind of crazy, right? It also has access to things like Earthquake as well, which of course is very, very good. And it also just has a ridiculous amount of coverage as well, right? It has access to things like Brick Break, again, if you want to break screens, has access to the Elemental Fangs, right? So you got Fire Fang, Thunder Fang, and, did I say Thunder Fang? I think I missed Thunder Fang there. Yeah, but it has all the Elemental Fangs, right? You got access to things like Dig, Stone Edge as well for a secondary stab move. It has access to close combat. Rock Blast as well is really good for like a ranged attacking move. So this Pokemon does have a lot of stuff going for it. I will say the one disappointing thing is it doesn't have ways to buff up its attack stat, right? From what I've seen, it doesn't have access to Bulk Up, Curse, or Swords Dance, which is kind of sad. I would like for it to have ways to buff it up. But again, this Pokemon is still really, really squishy. And because of that, I do think Focus Sash is probably the way to play it, right? Obviously, you probably are still going to run something like this. But even with a set like this, you are still susceptible to things like Earthquake from the, the drills. Of course, the Garchomps as well. The Dragon Rushes are another thing you have to be careful for. So this Pokemon is still really squishy, but its damage output is crazy. Like Head Smash off a 121 is incredibly good. I also think Expert Belt as well is like really, really good on this Pokemon. Again, it's just really, really solid, right? Just buffing up, these attacks, right? So say you go for something like this, and then your final move here, probably something like, let's just say Ice Fang, right? Or Thunder Fang, whatever it is, right? Whatever coverage move you want. Just getting that bonus damage is really, really good. And another one I'll throw out there as well. This is an item I've been loving lately, but it's the Sugar Berry, right? Everyone wants to run Earthquake, so having the ability just to take the Earthquake and then potentially trade, right? Say you have an extra drill run at you both quick Earthquake, they get theirs off first, and then bang, you survive thanks to the Sugar Berry, and then you use KO it. And again, this is kind of where Focus Sash is like probably the better of the two, right? Anyway. But I still love Shuka Berry as well. I'd have to look more into the calcs, but I do think Shuka is very, very good. But again, I think you're probably best off looking at something like the Focus Sash. So to wrap this up, originally I did only want to talk about 5 Pokemon, but I kind of just want to throw some honorable mentions out there because I think there are quite a few Pokemon that are still pretty solid for one specific niche, and that is what I've spoken about all game, but that is the old Light Screen plus Reflect combo. So again, Light Screen Reflect, just dual screens, is incredibly good. It's a fantastic way to lead in this game, and it's just one of the most powerful ways to do it. Now, as you scroll down the list, you're going to see here, there are a lot of Pokemon that can do it, right? Mega Alakazam is the one I've looked at, going for something like, Psychic Stab, Focus Blast, dual screens. Obviously, Mega Clef is a Pokemon I have showcased on the channel doing it, very, very good. D-Knight's another one I've theory crafted doing it, right? Mega Lass as well, Mega Glaceon. There's a lot of Pokemon that can do it, right? But the ones I want to talk about today are Meowstic Female, and the other one I wanted to touch on here as well, in particular, was, I believe, Where Are You, Klefki? So again, Fairy Steel, very, very good right now, right? Obviously, you do have to be careful of Earthquakes, but it is still really, really solid. And the main reason I just want to talk about these guys is dual screens. I think dual screens is absolutely broken in this game. Again, there's a lot of Pokemon that can use dual screens, right? You're looking at the list. You can go Mega Guardian's got dual screens. Espeon's got access to dual screens. Delphox has got access to dual screens, which is going to be really interesting when it gets to Mega next month, right? And again, in saying that, we're like, next month, we're like probably a week away. Probably this time next week, I'll be playing Mega Delphox, which is kind of crazy. But like, even mods like Auroras, right? You have that iced Pokemon there that has access to screens. Aromatisse is a Fairy type with screens, right? Obviously, Ampharos is probably the premier screen setter right now. So this is coming, it's just kind of just like a, I guess what do you call it? A bonus, right, guys? If you're not doing it already, run something with dual screens. Of course, we see the Metagrosses, the Ampharoses, right? There are a lot of Pokemon, the Clefs, that are all running dual screens. If you're not running dual screens, I would highly, highly recommend it. It just makes it so much harder to beat you. And I think the strategy is just incredibly, incredibly broken. But anyway, guys, let me know down below what you think. Let me know which Pokemon you missed. When I was looking through the list here, I was kind of shocked at how few Pokemon in this game actually don't Mega. It is crazy to think about when you go down the list and you've got like 50 plus Pokemon that all Mega Evolve now, and it's a dex with only 230 Pokemon, right? You take out the 5 legendaries, and then you just like take out all the Pokemon that obviously aren't fully evolved, and you aren't left with that many Pokemon, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, anyway guys, that's gonna be it for this one. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.